I will not accept a trilogy that I do not deserve. But I deserve the hell out of this one. What is up, everybody, and welcome to my review of the conclusion of Ti West's X trilogy titled MaXXXine. This has been my most anticipated film of the year so far. I was a massive fan of X. That was the biggest surprise of the last number of years. Also really enjoyed Pearl. Not quite as much as X, but I'm pretty certain both of them made my top 10 the year that they came out. And I was highly anticipating seeing how Ti West intended on landing this plane and closing out this trilogy with MaXXXine. And this movie continues a number of years after the events of X, where MaXXXine in the mid-80s is now a somewhat prominent adult star trying to break out into actual Hollywood movies. And just as she starts to see the signs of maybe getting her first big break, the past comes back to haunt her. And so you have this masked killer during the backdrop of the Night Stalker killings of 1985 that is going around and murdering everybody around MaXXXine, jeopardizing her brand new role, and she has to kick into action to make sure that she secures her future as a superstar. Before I even get into my thoughts on MaXXXine, I just want to say what an awesome treat and surprise this trilogy has been. By now, after seeing MaXXXine, I legitimately think it's one of the greatest trilogies in horror history. Just all three movies I think are fantastic, and it's just awesome to be able to say that without none of us even expecting this thing to come. Like, nobody saw X coming. Certainly nobody saw Pearl or MaXXXine coming after that. I mean, if Ti West had come out a couple of years ago and said, I'm planning this trilogy where I want to explore the evils and the apathy that comes along with fame and fortune, and I'm going to take it in 3 different movies, 3 different distinct styles, 3 different eras, and pay homage to 3 very different styles of filmmaking while doing so, we would be like, dude, that is way over ambitious. Good luck. But as far as my money goes, he fucking nailed it. So this to me cements Ti West as like a horror god at this point, somebody that I'm absolutely going to keep my eyes on, and the character of MaXXXine and Pearl are cemented as horror icons to me. I'm a massive fan of this trilogy, and it's just so relieving and so exciting to be able to say that instead of being able to turn on the camera and be like, well, they almost did it. And the last thing that I need to say, because I'm sure I'm going to get these questions a lot in the comment section. First one is, do you need to watch X and Pearl before you check out MaXXXine? Are you going to be able to follow MaXXXine if you start here? First of all, why are you considering not watching those other 2 films? I highly encourage you to watch this entire trilogy. And even if you don't like one of them, they're so different and distinct that you might like the other ones. So I would encourage you to check them out, but you absolutely need to see X. You know, you could survive without seeing Pearl, but this directly follows the events of X, and there are a lot of implications from the events of X that take place here, and you probably will be a bit lost. The other question is there a post-credit scene? Is there a tease for something more? Because we got the teaser for Pearl at the end of X, we got the teaser for MaXXXine at the end of Pearl. No. There's, you know, a soundtrack, there's a little Be Kind rewind gag at the very end of it, kind of get into that 80s aesthetic, but there's no post-credit scene. So if you don't want to stay, don't feel obligated to stay. And now moving on to the positives of MaXXXine, and this movie is dripping in style. I think it has such a cool visual look to it. It's got such a cool aesthetic. It's a really nice little genre blender and style blender as well. Like, you have, of course, some 80s horror in here. You've got a little bit of detective noir flavor. You've got a lot of bit of giallo Italian horror influences in here. And so the whole thing, like, you could put the movie on mute and it would still be captivating visually to watch because of the visual style that Ti West executed to tell this story. Now, I love the 80s. Most of my favorite films of all time are from the 80s. Most of my favorite music of all time is from the 80s. And we are in an era where we've got a little bit of 80s nostalgia overload. But what I think sets this movie apart is that this very much bathes in like the dirtiness of the 80s. Of course, you have the over-the-top style in here, but it's not like that neon glamorous version of the 80s. Like I said, this is the backdrop of the Night Stalker killings, and this is when the PMRC was trying to take down metal music for having like satanic messaging and everything. Like, this is the backdrop that we are living in for this movie, and I think it adds such a cool aesthetic that has that 80s charm, but it's very different than what we typically get. Performances all across the board are great. Of course, Mia Goth, like, this is her star-making trilogy. Like, it's almost a bit of a mirror story of having Maxine Minx be like this, you know, this origin of a superstar in this trilogy, while Mia Goth is having basically the same exact effect. I mean, she's always been around, but this is the trilogy of movies that really made a lot of us take note and be like, holy shit, this woman can act her ass off.
Nicely done.
Thank you.
Now, I don't think that the performance is nearly like as captivating or dynamic or memorable as, say, some of the scenes in Pearl, but what I love about what she does with this character is that there's such a badass edge to her. Like, she has such a rebel without a cause attitude, and she has such a drive to her. And so even though there's a lot of aspects to her that should be a bit of a concern or something that would maybe make her an unsympathetic character, like the choices that she makes and the industry that she decides to work in and how apathetic she is to a lot of other people that get in the way of her rise to stardom, like, that should be something that makes her maybe a complicated, unlikable character, but you never dislike this character. You're like, hell yeah, bitch, take your fucking crown. You're a queen. Let's go. But as great as she is, Kevin Bacon steals this movie. And it's so awesome to have a weekend where two movies, Kevin Bacon is a standout, but even more so. As much as I liked him in Beverly Hills Cop, he is the standout of this movie. He is very much playing like a play on the Harbogast character from Psycho, while at the same time having like this Louisiana draw to him and this slimy scumminess. And so every scene that he is in, you just want more Kevin Bacon. And so he's creepy, he's kind of exciting, he's hilarious, he's intoxicating. Like, every scene that he's in, it's the coolest performance and most unique performance that I've seen Kevin Bacon give in a very long time. So that was a great surprise as a big fan of that man. And I just love the fact that no matter how big he has gotten, no matter how much of an icon he absolutely is, he has never really turned his nose up or steered away from his horror roots. He has always embraced the fact that he got his start in Friday the 13th, and he's continued to do horror movies like Stir of Echoes, and now he's doing this, and it's just yet again one of his best performances. And I just love the fact that he continues to play around in this genre.
Name 5 celebrities who got their start in horror movies.
Jamie Lee Curtis, John Travolta, Demi Moore, and
a great hero named Kevin Bacon.
Now, as far as the story of MaXXXine, I love how distinctive and different this is from the other two. With X, you had very much an homage to some of the more exploitation type slashers of the 70s, like Texas Chainsaw, and then in Pearl's much more of a character study, and in this one, it's a murder mystery. You have these killings going on, you have a masked killer that we don't know the identity of, you have MaXXXine that's caught up in the middle of all this, and there's detectives, and there's private investigators, and you got the backdrop of Hollywood, and the Night Stalker killings, and so it's very much a movie that is this murder mystery. And so as a piece of this trilogy, I love how Ti West has continued to make these movies completely stand out, where you could watch all three of these and not really get any form of exhaustion of watching the same franchise, because they are so distinct and different. And the kills and the violence that we do get here, I think, is very effective. It's not quite as kill-driven as the back half of X. You know, it's not going for that slasher vibe as much, but what we do get here, I think, is effectively gross. I think that there's a good amount of gruesome brutality in there, and the way that it's shot is very cool and stylistic. Again, very Giallo inspired, and a nice variety of kills too. So there was at least 2 of them where, as it was happening, I was like, oh fuck, oh, carnage candy, god damn. And as a closeout to this trilogy, narratively, I do think that it brings the entire theme home of fame and the prices of that, and what you have to go through and what it will cost you to achieve all of that. You know, we got a version of that in Pearl where somebody could not achieve that and what it did to them for the rest of their life. And then you had those stories cross over in X. And then here in MaXXXine, we are closing out the story of Maxine Minx and how far she is willing to go to become the superstar that she has always wanted to be. And again, it's just kind of refreshing and unique to have that journey to stardom that is peered through the lens of dirtiness and ickiness and kind of the evil of Hollywood and the apathy of everybody around them, where like you literally have a director in the midst of all these killings. It's like, hey, we gotta shoot on Monday. Like, you gotta take care of this shit and fucking be here on time. Like, are you willing to do that?
Pleased to meet you. Sorry.
We've all got blood on our hands now.
It just does a good job at wrapping everything up. For three very unique movies, there's this thematic through line that comes to a really nice conclusion here. And now moving on to the mixed elements. As I said before, this movie is heavily influenced and is very deliberately paying homage to giallo horror. Now, giallo is a version of Italian horror that is like a murder mystery that has slasher elements and has some sexploitation sometimes and has a little bit of noir flavor in there. Like, it's a very specific style of Italian horror, and I myself am not very well versed in it. I will tell you that right now. It is absolutely one of my weaknesses as far as my horror knowledge and being able to speak very well about it. But even me, I picked up on all of the influences for the most part, and I could tell what they were going for with some of the visuals, with the gloved killer, and some of the very red fluorescent lighting, even the way that they shoot and frame some of the kills, and even in a lot of ways, kind of in American cinema, you have a very deliberate influence for Brian De Palma's films, which are very giallo-esque. So it is a movie that is bathed in that style of filmmaking. And if you're somebody that is not very well versed in it or does not have an affinity for it, then some of the magic of this movie might get lost on you, because as much as I appreciate it, if I was a big giallo fan, I could imagine I would have loved this movie even more, and those that do not like giallo, I could see watching this and not exactly getting into it as much. And I even talked with Celise from Sweet and Spooky. Definitely check out her review whenever she gets to it, because she's a massive giallo fan. She'll be able to talk about it way better than I will. And she was even telling me some of the elements of this movie that were giallo influenced that I didn't even pick up on, like some of the styles with the detective characters and everything. So it really is going to depend on how much of a giallo fan and how much you appreciate that subgenre of horror to how much you're going to be able to appreciate and really soak in the magic of what Ti West is doing here. And I also think that there's a bit of a valid argument that the movie's shortcomings even come from very deliberately paying homage to giallo, because from what I gather, giallos are known very much for being a lot of style over substance. It's much more about the visuals and the brutality and things like that over the storytelling necessarily. And I could see a lot of people saying that MaXXXine follows suit with that, and they would have a valid argument. So the giallo influences, it's going to win a lot of people, it's going to lose some. And now moving on to the negatives, and this movie does have a few shortcomings for sure. I can understand a lot of people saying that this is the weakest of the trilogy, while I still think that all three of these films are fantastic. So the main one for me is that I wish we got a bit more depth with the character of MaXXXine Minx. I feel like what we got here is just kind of an extension of what we already knew about her in X and what we already learned about her there. It's just kind of ramped up a bit. And because Pearl especially was such a character-driven film and really let Mia Goth like just go all out with her performance of that character, I think maybe that set up some expectations for me that MaXXXine was going to get a little bit of that treatment here, and she doesn't. You know, she doesn't have near the depth of the character that Pearl had. And I wish I would have gotten a little bit more of that. The movie functions just fine with just extending what we know about her and having a little bit more of that kick-ass edge to her, but I wanted to get to know her a little bit beyond just somebody who is absolutely hell-driven to become a star. And the only other negative for me was that despite the fact that I enjoyed the murder mystery element here, I did find the mystery to be fairly predictable. I knew within the first act exactly where things were going to go, and I'm not going to give any hints about that because I don't want to tip anybody off that maybe is going to have a more successful journey with the mystery here. But even with knowing exactly where things were going to go and who the killer was going to be and what everything was going to mean by the end of it, I still think it was a really fun time and it was a good conclusion for this trilogy. So it didn't hurt it too much, but those two elements, if they had been done better, this might have been my favorite of the trilogy. But as it stands now, pretty sizable flaws there that despite loving the movie, I absolutely acknowledge it's going to be an issue for some. So overall, guys, I loved this as a conclusion to this trilogy. I think that this trilogy in and of itself is just such an awesome gift for horror fans, and you know, it's not going to be for everybody, but it absolutely is for me, and I could see myself rewatching all three of these for the rest of my life and never getting tired of them. So MaXXXine, for me, they landed the hell out of this plane. It just oozes with style, a lot of fun performances, really cool blend of influences and styles, and I just had a really great time with it, and I hope you do too. So check it out this weekend, and if you want to go ahead and let me know your ranking of this trilogy down below, I will be doing a ranking in a couple of days, so be sure to come back for that. Well, that's it for this one, guys. If you enjoyed that, please click over here for all of my 2024 new release reviews so far, and I'm also going to create a playlist and put it up here for the X trilogy if you want to see my thoughts on all three of these films. So like, share, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss my ranking here in a couple of days, and as always, remember, opinions are like assholes, but that doesn't mean you have to be.